Hey there, welcome to the channel. So today we're going to look at a little bit of a controversial subject. We're going to look at the whole Russia-Ukraine situation that's going on right now as we speak. Okay, so to understand some of the basics of what is going on in Ukraine, we have to kind of go back to really, 2014 and a little bit before. Basically, there was a coup in Ukraine. What happened at that time? There was a leader who was elected, in the 2010 election, pardon me. And what happened? Petro Poroshenko, he was duly elected. As far as I know, they considered it a valid election with minimal amount of whatever problems. And that at the time, Ukraine was the part that we know of Ukraine, including Crimea. Now, what happened is at some point, there became negotiations with the European Union and negotiations with Russia. In the issue that essentially became at the core of it is, where did Ukraine want to be? Did it want to be more associated with the West, the EU, the US, UK, or did it want to be more associated with Russia? And this is where the divide is, because when you go to those original maps and you look at it, you can see that the eastern part of Ukraine has a large or a significant greater than 50% of the population is actually Russian speaking, and they more align with Russia. So you have this eastern part that voted more for being part of or closer to, not part of, but closer to in association with Russia. Whereas on the West, you have this divide, where it's like, okay, on the West, we want to be part of the EU. So one of the things that we can do is to look at what's going on with the conflict now. Where we're at here, this is a good map, Washington Post. They have this kind of a couple charts that explain this. One of the things to look here is the former Soviet Union. This dark brown line here kind of shows the outline of it. And you can see that includes Estonia, Latvia, and Ukraine was all part of that, including Crimea and Georgia, and all these different places were part of the former Soviet Union. Now, what happened is the wall fell, right? And so a lot of these countries all kind of become on their own, okay? So now what happens is the wall falls, the USSR breaks apart, and now all these countries are out there. And then what's happening is NATO is getting a lot of these countries and giving them membership. Now, a lot of these countries are very close to the border with Russia. They're very close. And that's one of the main issues. Now, going back to the 2014, after the response of basically a coup, and there's certainly reasonable things to think that the US and EU were supported, at least, or if not, were responsible for. And, you can look up on how many coups the CIA has been involved in, and it's something like 50 that we think we know about now. So I don't think it's unrealistic to expect that that could be a situation. But the end result was that we get this breakaway region, Luhansk and Donetsk, and these are basically independent. They're basically controlled by separatists. They set up their own government, etc. However, there's a contact line with the Ukraine, and this is where a lot of the violence is going on. There is fighting and stuff like that. Also, what happened is, Russia came in, put troops in, and they basically annexed Crimea. So Crimea now is part of Russian territory. These breakaway regions are not at this point. Now, what is the main issue here? What is really, if we look on the West, the side of the West, there's obviously the people in the western part of Ukraine, and maybe all of Ukraine, can't speak for them, want to have their country. They probably want to just be left alone. Definitely in the West, they probably want to be more associated with the EU. They may want to be part of NATO. I'm not 100% sure on that. The Russian point of view is this point of view here. If you look over here, and we have this good map. Now, this is from NATO, and this is the NATO map, and this is going to help explain part of what's going on there. Okay, 1990, and this is before the wall came down, thanks to, what's his name? Baywatch guy and Kit the car guy. Gosh, David Hasselhoff. David Hasselhoff, responsible for the Berlin Wall coming down. Not, but he thinks it is. But here you can see this stark contrast. 1990, NATO countries. UK, West Germany, and see, there was the wall because we still had East Germany. It was not unified. Warsaw Pact countries. These are the Soviet Union, and they're all in this pact, but include East Germany, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria. Now look at 2015. Look at that map. All these former territories, many of the former Warsaw Pact countries are now part of NATO. Look up above. They're not showing it. It's funny how they don't label it. Germany, not just West Germany, unified Germany is now part of NATO, looking below. Above it, Poland, now part of NATO. Czechoslovakia, part of NATO now. Broken up into Czech Republic and Slovakia. Slovakia, that's my family, where we associate it as being of Slovak origin. Depending on which census you look at, it could be Hungary, Slovak, we're not really sure. But all those countries have now flopped. And then you have Romania and Bulgaria. So if you look at this, the Soviet Union had, before 1990, they had this bulwark, this kind of buffer between NATO and themselves. And the consequence of that is several things. First of all, it gives you a buffer. If, for example, NATO was going to attack the Soviet Union, East Germany is going to fall first. Czechoslovakia is going to fall. Poland, whatever. There's time for them to respond. Second issue is that if it comes down to like NATO is going to do a first strike with nukes, there's a little more time. We got to launch the missiles. They have whatever, a couple hundred more miles to go. There's a little more time. Now go forward to this. Now here you are, Russia, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. These are all part of NATO. And the key part of the NATO membership is the concept, and it's part of one of the articles, is an attack on one is attack on all. Okay, so that means if little crappy Latvia here gets attacked by Russia, according to that, we're at world war, right? Germany, France, Spain, the US, UK, we all got to start lobbing nukes at Russia, right? And it would work on a counter. Latvia could be doing stupid stuff on the border with Russia. Maybe they're doing stupid stuff. I don't know, because they're like, hey, no one's going to do anything to us. And I would just take a moment, if you ever watch the Great War Channel and a lot of the stuff that led up to that, very similar dynamics. Because going at that time, like this little crap country, a guy gets murdered and that drags in the entire world armies. So it's something to not take lightly. Now, here's the deal. See, on this map, they don't even show it, but in here is what? Ukraine. Right. So Ukraine is right up against the border, and it's right in here. And I don't know exactly where it is, but it's another one of these nations that encroaches further on Russia's border. Okay. What is the other issue? The other issue is that, see, we go back and we have Poland. So now Poland is sitting there, and Poland is part of this, right? Poland is this big land mass here, and it's swapped over. Now it's part of NATO. And, this is just one of the examples. Putin's very concerned. There's a NATO missile base there. They're concerned that this is the comment that he's made that, hey, I'm going to get 5 minutes notice. Missiles coming in. Quite honestly, a rational person would think that it's not good for anyone. So that's kind of the concept. And that's the conflict. And a lot of what I've done is I've expressed the Russian side of it, right? And I haven't expressed the West side of it, or the Western part of Ukraine side of it, right? Because you get that side. Like, I get it. Ukraine, is a sovereign country, should be a sovereign country. They shouldn't be invaded. 100% get it, right? But on the other hand, should Ukraine become part of NATO? Is that realistic? In this map, we see how Poland is really close. And what you're doing is, and Belarus is very close to Russia right now, but you take Ukraine, large landmass, you get this huge border along Russia that's going to be, an issue for them. So now going forward, let's look at one other aspect of this. The other aspect is that if Putin is looking at this and he's thinking like whether he's going to go and make his move now, we have several issues going on. One issue is why now? This stabilized this area, Luhansk, Donetsk, somewhere after the 2014, and here we are in 2022. This all stabilized. Yes, there's fighting, there's minimal amount of fighting, but there's, people are dying, and it's unfortunate, but it's stable. The lines are relatively stable going on. Okay, so why now? So one of the issues to look at, and we have to look at this, Biden. Biden is very unpopular right now. Here we can look over time in this 538 project, really good because they kind of track and they different grade the polls based on, trying to get an idea of the quality, but then they also just plot, kind of averages of the numbers. So you can see that Biden's approval has gone into the crapper here, 52.6%. And that's just the average, right? You can see here this widening gap for very little of the studies. See how these are all little little plots, individual plots of individual surveys. So some of them have him, doing better than he is, but more and more of them are pushing above that line to disapprove. You see what I mean? And so if you look at that, let's look at some other presidents and let's just kind of look like, would they drum up conflict? Let's take an example and let's look what happens when there is a conflict. Great one is Bush, G.W. Bush. His first term, 2001, what happened? This huge thing, he's there, blah, blah, blah. Not very popular, not super unpopular, but right down the middle. Boom, what happened? What was that day? Right? We know what that day was. September 11th, boom, instantly the country unites behind him. He gets this huge amount of approval. He goes into Afghanistan, and then eventually we do all this other stuff. But he gets to this huge benefit of the simple fact is that if the country, we stop fighting with each other when we have an external enemy. And look, I understand it's a long time gone now, but knocking down those buildings in New York and then attacking the whatever you call it, the Pentagon, it was a big thing. And I remember people passing around Excels of photographs of people. They were jumping because they were jumping out of the floors above because they couldn't get out. One guy on fire praying, just amazing. And so they hit us, and they hit us really bad. And so he got all the benefit down. And look, he bled it off over the next year in the rest of his term, but he bled it off. Now I want to look at one other one here. I want to look at his father, George H.W. Bush, and I want to look at his. What happened here is at the end of his term, remember he had the first Gulf War happened in this period of time, and once again he had popularity and everything, but then over time his popularity went down, and there was this very little thing at the end. What was this last little thing? His popularity is very low, and he's actually trying to get reelected. And so what happens is he actually goes into Somalia. And if you ever watch the movie Black Hawk Down, Somalia, basically he sends more troops into there to go after the warlords, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, disaster, whatever. But he was doing that, why? To get his ratings up. And it actually worked, even though the fact is it was pretty brutal. So now the question is, really, when you look at it, Biden could use the threat of a war. I don't believe in any way that he really wants a hot war. But I believe for sure that he certainly is happy to have the conflict being raised up, attention being diverted from what? One of his biggest problems is what? Inflation. We have had historic inflation going that's higher than it was in the 70s. We have rates at 0%. Meaning we've had rates at very low percentages for a very long time. And, the Fed has boxed themselves into a corner. It's going to be very difficult for them to raise rates without breaking something. And Biden's approval is pretty low. And it's pretty low because one of the main things is the inflation. I would maintain as well things like the mandates, the flip-flop on that. He said there will be no vaccine mandates. BS. Sure, certainly there is. And that, from my perspective, is a clear violation of human rights to mandate that someone take a shot. Morally, ethically wrong in every way that it could be. And if you doubt that, what's the difference between that and escalating to a point of where, various doctors during World War II did horrible things on populations? Really nothing else we really need to say there. So now I'm going to go and I'm going to switch. I'm going to switch a little bit. And what I want to do is think about, is Putin going to go? What is he going to do? Let's, so we're obviously all speculation, right? I'm not some highfalutin guy with PhDs in European history and crap like that, right? here's the thing. So if you look at it, he's got a couple things going on. He's got the Nord Stream 2 pipeline built, not commissioned yet. It puts natural gas directly into Germany. Germany has been less inclined. They've been less inclined to do things like put sanctions on Russia right now. And there's been a little more rational, maybe, in their language about this conflict, right? The issue then is he's got a weak president in the US with very low support. From his perspective, he's a weak president. From mine, he's a very weak president. And so now is a great opportunity. If you're going to do this, if this thing's been going on since 2014, you have this crap going on, and there's still, after all this, there's still talk of like Ukraine's going to go join NATO. We want it to join NATO. We're giving them weapons. We want them to join NATO. And the threat of that to Russia, right or wrong, they feel threatened. Stuff in Poland, the stuff in all these former Warsaw Pact countries. They feel threatened by that. So at some point, it's got to make a move, right? So let's say, hey, they go and negotiate, and Putin's like going to negotiate. Let's say they come up with some agreement, and the agreement is like, hey, look, Ukraine, US, NATO, we all agree it's never going to be part. We're not going to extend an option to have a part in NATO. Okay, so that would like theoretically help a lot of Russia's main concerns, right? So that should pretty much end it right there. But the question is, will they be willing to do that? Like, for example, are the people at NATO, or is Biden willing to actually negotiate that? I don't think they are, because they don't see it that way. They see themselves as the white knights, as the good guys, and Russia is the bad guy. And because of that, they are not actually willing to negotiate about anything. Okay, so if you look at it from Russia's point of view, even if we stop, have diplomacy, we come up with an agreement, he's got another president. Joe Biden will be gone in 3 years. And then who's he going to get? See, if he did this earlier with Trump, probably would have had to, deal with some missiles. I mean, Trump did bomb a Russian military base inside Syria, right? He warned them, told them to get out. They got out. No one got killed. That's good. But he launched 50 Tomahawk missiles in there, right? So he would probably view like, okay, he's got to start hedging his bets. Is Trump going to get back in? If Trump gets back in, well, then I'm probably not going to be able to do anything, because Trump will probably just be more aggressive about it, right? Okay, so I got a weak president who's weak. It's now, we still have a little bit of winter. So the high energy prices, this helps his leverage, right? This helps Putin's leverage, because if the war starts now, oil is almost at $100 a barrel, right? And oil will shoot through the roof. At the same time that he's got Germany, where like, hey, Germany's not going to totally back up crazy stuff from the EU. The US president is weak. If he's going to do anything, he's going to do something now. And he's got to do it before spring gets here, and the pressure on the oil and natural gas pricing will dissipate. He's going to lose leverage. He's got to do it before there's another president that might be stronger. He's got to do it. He's got to do it at some point. He's got to like find a way to take Ukraine and make sure that it will just not become a part of NATO. And how is he going to do it? So the only way that you can look at it is like, there's no room for diplomacy, right? I mean, where's the diplomacy? Like, obviously you'd look at it and say, well, can't we just all get in the room and talk, and we can work out and say, hey, look, I think you're irrational about this, that, the missiles here. You're irrational about the NATO thing, but okay, let's do a deal. Let's just take it on face value. This is how you feel, and we're going to give you some reassurances there. It should just be over, right? But the question is, will it? So now flip to the other side. Now Putin is ex-KGB. I'm sure he's a son of a bitch, man. That guy, like, he's ex-KGB guy. Like, if he's looking at it, is there part of him that's looking at this thing and he's saying to himself, you know what, I want to flop these countries. Look at all these things. Look at all these freaking countries that have flipped on us. Is he thinking to himself, hey, I want to flip a couple of these. If I can flip Ukraine, I'm willing to do it, because maybe he wants to rebuild his empire. So see how I'm going in both directions here. I've spent the first 20 minutes criticizing the West and our policies, but likewise, a similar criticism of him. Now, here's the problem. The problem is that you're giving him a pass. You're giving him a way to actually justify doing something. And the result of him doing something could just be a disaster for Ukraine. You know, one thought is that he comes in and he just takes this part, he takes these breakaway regions, builds a land bridge, and there's actually a little part of, let's see, there's a little territory up here. Yes, this is the one. He's got this one, separatist controlled areas. There's one thought where he does stage one is he invades all from the south, right? He's going to merge this all together. Okay, so one thought is what he does is he moves up here, comes in here, comes up here and here. And what he's going to do is he's going to merge these areas. And then this is where there's supposedly some CIA intel that, okay, this is like phase one. So this is P1. He does this and he stops. Now he's got this little part of Moldavia. With that, he's got all the land bridge, everything all tied up, and he stops there. That's one thought. And then he tries to negotiate, and then negotiation would center around what? Ukraine, no more, no NATO. We annex all this territory. The next part is he goes further. He goes up to something like here. And this would be the phase two. And so he just takes more. And what he's doing is putting more and more pressure on it. But what you notice is coming more west, right? And this is going to be a problem. If he wants to be in Afghanistan again, well, more power to him. Okay. Phase three is like, okay, we give up, we take over the whole damn thing. He comes in from Belarus, comes in up here, and then he continues to push, and he actually takes the capital, and then he forces capitulation. And at that point, then the question is, what does he do? Then in reality, what he does is he breaks it all up. He breaks it up and he takes what he wants over here. So now this whole picture of Ukraine as a country just goes away. Some part of it like this, probably this part of it all becomes part of Russia. This part becomes somewhat independent states are all over the place somewhere. And it's all just a big mess. So I think that he's out of time. He's probably going to go. That's my guess. He's probably going to go and do it. How are we going to respond? What's sad is a bunch of people are going to die. Like if you go back in time, you go back to the coup and you go back to all this stuff and you look at what all our leaders since then have done, Obama, Trump, Biden, you guys have done nothing. You haven't done a thing. Everything you've done has just made the situation worse. And now a bunch of people are going to die. That's just the way it goes. And, just to be clear, Putin isn't the good guy in this. There are no good guys. He has the choice. If he goes and invades and he kills all these people, then he's the guy responsible for it, period, in a report. I just have this feeling that the Western leaders, we have fallen so far onto ignorance is just astounding. But I have that feeling that he's got a little more of a perspective. And so therefore, I suspect that he knows all this and he's going to take advantage of it. So I think what's really going on is that, once this thing starts, you're not going to stop it. And he's just going to be, he's just going to fall back on KGB mode. He's going to fall back KGB mode and just take the whole thing, break it up, do whatever the hell he wants. Everyone's going to yell and scream. And no one's going to do anything about it because, you're going to have to put weapons in there and you're going to have to do some fighting. All right. Well, that's it for this one. Bye.